Here's my last Trump question. If Trump was a sports bettor, what kind of sports bettor would he be? All right, welcome back to another edition of the Business of Betting podcast. I am joined today by Governor Chris Christie. Governor, good afternoon.
Jeff, good to see you again.
I'll tell you something. I'm getting a little Godfather 3 Al Pacino vibes. Just when you thought you were out, they pull you back in.
That's exactly true. As you remember, it was 6 long years of this stuff when I was governor. And so getting pulled back in 8 years later is interesting.
So was the AGA, did they come to you? Did you go to the AGA? Have you been in contact with them? How did this come to be that you're working with them?
The AGA came to me and asked if I'd be willing to help on this issue of, sports betting and the prediction markets. And I feel so strongly about it personally that I told them I'd be happy to do it.
So let's ask you. So, I mean, obviously you were, a central player in PASPA getting overturned. What's the core principle here that irritates you the most when it comes to the prediction markets as far as you're getting back into it?
Follow the law. But just follow the law. It's really not hard. The United States Supreme Court said each state can make a judgment for themselves, whether they want to have sports gambling in their state or not. 40 of the 50 states said yes. And so in those 40 states, they've set up regulations that require the folks who get into this business, how they treat their customers, how they pay their customers, how they take money from their customers, what kind of taxes do they pay to the state, their coordination with law enforcement and the leagues on integrity issues. All those things are regulated by the states in the way that they see fit. And for 8 years now, the system has worked incredibly well. When there have been some problems, where there have been some integrity issues, the recent NBA and MLB stuff, that was discovered because the betting companies saw anomalies in the betting and they turned that over immediately to the leagues and to law enforcement. All that comes as part of the regulation. And in the 10 states where they don't want it, that's their right. What are the prediction markets doing? They're saying, screw you to all of the states. The ones that have it, the ones who don't. For the ones that have it, they say, we won't be subjected to your regulation. We won't pay your taxes. We won't agree to your consumer protections. We're just going to do what we want. And in the 10 states that say that they don't want sports gambling, they say, too bad. We're going to give it to you anyway. So to me, they're just absolutely flagrantly violating the law. And it's taking something that the American people have shown they really want to do and really enjoy, and they're turning it into a much riskier venture than it needs to be for those consumers. And they're putting the screws to the states as well.
Now, in your mind, do you want to see the door slam shut on the prediction markets, or would you rather see them come willfully underneath the circus tent and play by the rules?
I think they should willfully come under the circus tent if they're willing to play by the rules. I don't have any, dog in this fight, Jeff, as for an individual company. If they want to come in and they want to compete with the casinos and with the online betting companies, come on in. If you have a better concept and a better product, I assume you'll do well. But you got to comply with the rules rather. And they're not doing that. And it puts the companies who are complying with the rules at a disadvantage.
If you were going to argue the other side of this, what would be their best argument that what they're doing is fine?
The only argument they have, the CFTC and the Trump administration has completely changed their tune on this. And now all of a sudden they're saying it's okay. That's the only argument they really have.
As far as like the fight of it goes, you've known me long enough to know that I'm a moron. But you look at PASPA, you look at that Supreme Court in 2018, and, it was a states' rights issue. That's where they landed. Of anything, the court seems to be even more aligned on the states' rights bandwagon. I find it hard to imagine a scenario where they get this case and they turn their back on their original ruling, right? There's just no way to know what the Supreme Court does. And it probably ends up there, yeah?
It probably will. But I think what we should do now is the individual states should stand up for their rights. And you're seeing that happen in a lot of the states. Massachusetts, Nevada, Iowa, there are a number of them. Georgia, they're standing up for their rights, both states that have betting and states that don't, saying, hey, we're going to bring suit in state court. And what you see the prediction markets doing is suing them preemptively in federal court. So this is going to wind up ultimately at the Supreme Court, but no one knows exactly what will happen. And remember, the first time we went to the Supreme Court, they didn't take the case. So you can never really tell exactly what's going to happen with the court They have a lot of competition for their time and their attention. And so nobody should count on that. The state should be in state courts suing these companies and forcing them to comply with the law. And, to the extent that the states are reluctant to do that, they're going to lose in each individual state tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue. And the consumers are going to be hurt, Jeff, because you've seen some complaints already about the prediction markets outside of sports where people bet on the death of the supreme leader in Iran. Some other places thought they were going to get paid and they didn't. Well, don't go to your state regulator to complain about that because they're not there. And the CFTC doesn't have one investigator, Jeff, on staff. So how are they going to do it?
So two things I want to touch on based on what you just said. The consumer gets hurt. I understand that argument. But for an educated consumer, having the prediction markets around is kind of a help. It's just more outs for the bettor to have. So speaking as a bettor, I kind of want the prediction markets to one way or another, get through it, right? You're not getting limited at these prediction markets like some sports bettors. So, there's an argument to be made on that side that it's better for the consumer. It could be potentially better. But again, but if they're skirting the state laws and they're not paying taxes, I totally get that point. The other thing, you brought up the, Iran committee, and some of these, things have gotten pretty messy. Where do you stand on prediction markets as a whole? Like, do you think there's room for them, in the political field and, betting on the weather, whatever? Or do you think this is that the gamification, if you will, of everything is a bridge too far?
Look, I don't really care, to tell you the truth, Jeff. In the end, they're trying to act as if sports bets aren't sports bets. And that's what bothers me. It's like, oh no, they're sports event contracts. The hell, it's a bet. It's a bet. And so, like as to what they do with all these other things that people want to potentially wager on, remember this, 90% of the prediction market revenues come from sports. So I don't know if they could survive just doing the other things because I don't think there's a huge market for it.
Well, there's 24 entrants at least now in the field, but, Kalshi and Polymarket are the two that their whole business depends on sports, coming through. All everybody else would be just fine.
90% of the revenue on it. So, and they're the ones spending all the money advertising and doing all the rest. So, Jeff, in this business, follow the money.
That's it. All right. So looking at the sports betting world post-PASPA, is what's gone better than you expected? What maybe hasn't happened the way you would have liked to see it happen as you were, fighting this for all those years?
I think what I didn't anticipate was the proliferation of this on mobile phone. I thought that the casinos would play a bigger role in this than they ultimately have. And that really sports betting has become completely dependent on these items, And so that I didn't anticipate necessarily. But I think what's gone right is we told the sports leagues, who were the ones trying to prevent us from doing this, that this was going to increase revenue to them. This was going to increase fan awareness and participation, and it was going to make their sports bigger and better. And it has done that. And so, I think that, look, I would have loved if the casinos got more of the business because I originally went after this to try to help Atlantic City. But in the end, the consumer decides, right? And the consumers decided that the way they like to do this the most is over their phone. It's the most convenient way to do it. But what it's done for the sports in the United States has been extraordinary. And you look at just the NFL and what that's done for NFL Sundays, it's pretty amazing. I have two daughters, 30 and 22, who are texting me every Sunday morning with their parlays to see if I want to quote, is the quote, Jeff, want to ride with us, Dad? So that never happened before sports betting. I guarantee it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Concerning that, like, do you, again, when in 2013, when everyone's thinking about this for the first time, it's sides and totals, right? Not micro betting, not, live betting, not next pitch betting. Is that something that would rather see disappear, or do you think it's just part of the life now?
Look, I think a lot of those things have to be looked at more closely. And look, see what MLB has already come to an agreement with the companies to not do, live pitch betting because of the issues that happened allegedly with the pitchers in Cleveland. Now, I think there's going to be a lot more examination of that in the NBA in terms of live betting on free throws and on, minutes played and that kind of thing. So I do think that those individual type of bets may wind up getting pared back and probably should. But they should be done, if they're going to be done, Jeff, if it's going to be pared back, It should be based upon data that shows us this has a real potential problem with the leagues.
What about the NCAA has been very vocal in trying to get prop bets limited over there. Do you have a sense on that?
I totally favor it. I think prop bets for college kids, it increases, although in the NIL world, probably not as much as it used to, but it increases the chance of corruption. But it also puts enormous pressure on college athletes that they don't need to have, where kids in school have a bet on over under how many free throws are going to be hit, how many points for an individual player. And the guy doesn't, misses a layup or something, and he's getting hate mail to his dorm. I don't think that kind of stuff is necessary in college sports. And I think understanding that those are teenagers in the main, we should give them a little break.
No, I mean, I think there should be a lot more, since this Pandora's box, is open. There's got to be a lot more. Like if I tweet at an 18-year-old kid that I'm going to kill you if you don't make a free throw, I should be banned from betting forever. I should be in prison. There should be like a much more vibrant, police presence out here, investigating this kind of stuff.
I agree. And that's why, the states are the ones that are in the best position to do that and to come to an agreement with the different leagues about what stuff to have come on and off, along with the betting companies, not someone who's operating like rogue cowboys out of nowhere, like Kalshi and Polymarket are doing.
New Jersey really didn't have a fight in the daily fantasy time. I mean, I still fantasy football. We're talking about fantasy football. I mean, on the debate stage, that was your take. This feels much different to you. I'm taking it.
It does. Look, all of us knew that fantasy football and daily fantasy sports was just an attempt by these companies to gather customer lists for the day they hoped that sports betting was coming. I mean, let's face it, that's what it was. And the fact is, sports betting came, and those companies, DraftKings, FanDuel, predominantly, wound up becoming the dominant players in the sports betting market. No shock, because they had enormous customer lists of people who like to engage in this. So I'm not surprised as to how it all worked ultimately, but it does feel different because the stakes are much higher now. And when you have 40 of the 50 states, when you have 4/5 of the country engaging in this, the stakes are much larger than what we had in fantasy sports.
You've been governor, U.S. attorney, presidential candidate, cable news regular. Where does strategic advisor on the prediction market be ranked as far as these jobs?
It's getting the juices flowing, Jeff. I can tell you that. I mean, I've done more interviews on this, this week, as you might imagine, leading into March Madness. And I did a ton leading into the Super Bowl. Look, it's become, as you understand this as well as anybody out there. That's why so many people listen to this podcast. I mean, it's become a huge part of daily American life. And so, yeah, it gets the juices flowing. And I like getting back in the fight a little bit. It's fun.
I've heard you on a few podcasts over the last few weeks, just in general. Your normal loose lips have gotten a little bit looser, I sense.
Getting older, Jeff, I mean, and look, I think I've always been the type, and I think you've seen this because you've known me for a long time. If you ask me a direct question, I'll answer. And I think what's happened on some of these podcasts recently, I mean, getting a lot of reaction to this Fifth Column podcast that I did, but people ask me about the people that I've interacted with over the years of my career. Unless I feel like I'm violating a personal trust, I'm going to answer the question.
Yeah, I was debating whether or not I want to get into anything outside of sports betting. I've decided that, yes, I am. In a million years, would you have ever imagined yourself openly saying, yeah, maybe I'll back a Democrat in 28?
Never. But that's what Donald Trump has done, in my view, to the Republican Party. I still think it's unlikely that I will, but before I would have never even been a consideration.
Are you considering one more dance around the pole?
I don't think so, Jeff, but, I'll never say never, because I still care a lot about these issues. And when I'm sitting watching the stuff that's going on right now around the world, it brings me back to the race in 24. I said to people when I was running the 24, this America first thing is going to lead to America alone. And we're going to be a weaker country because of it. And now you see us trying to deal with the Straits of Hormuz, and we're asking allies to come and help us, and they're saying no. Well, that has everything to do with the fact that he's been smacking them with unnecessary and unfair tariffs. He's threatened them that he's going to go and steal Greenland from one of our NATO allies, and he demeans all of them publicly on a regular basis. Well, then when you need a friend, the friend's going to be like, yeah, good luck. See you later. And the thing that's always differentiated America around the world is our friendships, our alliances, where we've worked together to bring peace and freedom to the world. And like that stuff's really bothering me right now. So, you call me on a day where, I might be more apt to say yes than I would otherwise.
25 years ago, I had some interactions with then just regular old non-president Donald Trump, and very charming, very helpful, answered my questions, took my calls. And I was like, oh, wow, this guy, he's good. That was about the extent of it. You obviously had a relationship with him, right? And you were, you were the first, mainstream Republican to back him. I don't want to say that he pulls the wool over your eyes, right? But like, you were the first of many to be burned by him. What is it about him, right, that brings you in? He won me over a long time ago.
I mean, we've known each other now for 24 years. He is charming and he is funny. And all those things help to lower your defenses a little bit. For me, the decision was made because I knew he was going to be the nominee. And I was just like, I was playing politics as it normally had been played, right? You run, you're unsuccessful, you get behind the person who you think is going to be the winner and try to make them better. And that's why I did what I did. Little did I know he had no interest in being better. And so, I don't say I was fooled, but it was more like I was playing the game the way it's always been played. And he has significantly changed those rules. And, when I learned that, that's why I never accepted a cabinet position from him, Jeff. He offered me Secretary of Labor twice. He offered me Secretary of Homeland Security, and ultimately offered me White House Chief of Staff in the first term. And I turned them all down because I could not work for somebody who has that little intellectual curiosity and that little integrity.
One thing that I'm curious of your position on, or your opinion on, I'm not a presidential scholar, but I do know that when presidential powers get expanded, it's rare that they get de-expanded, to coin a phrase. So what prevents the next president, whether it be you, whether it be Gavin Newsom, whether it be somebody nobody's Pete Buttigieg, who you name them, from not taking advantage of all the buttons that Trump pressed to gain power?
Only Congress getting out of its slumber and asserting its constitutional rights more affirmatively, and the courts continuing to be a check on presidential power. That's why the founders set it up the way they did, with the three branches in Article 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, lay out those powers. And quite frankly, the courts have done, I think, okay. Congress has been an abject failure, and they just roll over for him, lay down, and don't assert their rightful authority. And if we're going to have a Congress that's going to do that, then the system that the founders set up, which is such genius, fails because it still depends upon the integrity of human beings. And in my view, Congress has significantly let us down over the last number of years.
Here's my last Trump question. If Trump was a sports bettor, what kind of sports bettor would he be?
He'd be a live bettor. Impulse, baby. And then when he lost, he'd be the one calling the regulators and complaining that he got cheated.
That's a good. We'll clip that one. Listen, how about the Mets this year? It's brand new look. All of our favorites are gone. What do you think?
Look, I feel very optimistic about this team. I was down in spring training the last week of February. This is a team that's going to be a lot different than last year's team from an offensive perspective. It's going to be a team that is putting the ball in play, less power, more speed, more hitting it up the gap, more, key 2-out base hits. I think it's going to be a really fun team to watch. I think we're going to be playing in October, unlike last year. I was there for the last 3 games in Miami, and let me say, it was not pleasant, to say the least. And so, I feel pretty good about the team. I think, like, for every team, the key's going to be pitching. And does our pitching, I think it's better than last year. Having Peralta, having AJ Minter back, Manaea hopefully healthy, Nolan McLean, who's going to pitch tonight in the World Baseball Classic final. That's certainly getting my attention. I'm watching that game tonight. I feel pretty good about the Mets. I really do, Jeff. And I think, it is the disease of every Met fan to think that next season is going to be better than last season, but I'm celebrating 2 anniversaries this year. Just a week ago, I celebrated my 40th wedding anniversary with my wife. We got married in March of 1986, and I'm going to be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the last Mets World Series. So let's hope we end it this year, Jeff. We end it this year. We start a new clock running.
From your lips. I was a freshman in high school, and during that playoff run, I had yet to discover beer, women. I was living and dying with the Mets. And then I discovered beer and women. I was wildly successful in one of those endeavors. The other took some time. But yeah, it's 40 years. 40 years.
It's unbelievable. Like, I mean, tell you this, like, look, it affected everybody that year. Like, that was my first year of marriage, right? So my wife and I had not lived together before we got married. So I'll tell you a great story. Opening night, April 1st of 1986, Dwight Gooden is pitching for the Mets in Pittsburgh against the Pirates. I was in law school at the time. I get home from law school. My wife gets home from work. We throw together whatever dinner you throw together when you're 22 and 23 years old. And I grab the plate and go to the living room to turn on the TV. I said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, it's opening night for the Mets. I got to watch the Mets. She's like, after dinner, you'll watch the Mets. Not now. We don't eat dinner in front of the TV. And I'm like, well, I don't know what this we stuff is, but I sure as hell do. And it caused this enormous fight between us that night while I'm trying to watch Doc Gooden open the season for the Mets. So my wife, who had not lived with me, imagine the first year of your marriage, the first year you're living together is 1986. 108 wins, the amazing series against Houston, the amazing World Series. And my wife had to suffer through all of that. And so the fact that the marriage survived, Jeff, is as much of a miracle as the fact that they came back in Game 6.
So I think clearly I'm asking you from one Mets fan to another, please get into a big fight with your wife on opening day this year so that, maybe we could redo it.
Jeff, no one cares more about the Mets, so I'll definitely do it.
The story reminded me of my own story. 1999, I had just met my future wife. We were dating for about 6 months, and the Mets were in the playoffs, and they were playing, I think it was the Giants, and we were supposed to go out, and the game was going into extra innings, and I think Benny Agbayati, homer to get him there. And the 10th inning, 11th inning, 12th inning, I'm like, it'll be over soon. And she's getting irritated. And then the announcer pops on and says, well, we have just set the record for the longest playoff game in time by Major League Baseball history. And then I got the look, but they won that game. So it was all good.
Hey, look, you know what? We're so appealing, Jeff, that they hang in there no matter what.
It's hard to deny. It is just very, very hard to deny.
I saw a great tweet today that I sent to my kids. He had a picture of Tony Soprano, sitting on a bench with his head down, his hands folded, definitely bummed out. And he said, and the caption underneath it was, what every New Jerseyan looks like now that the World Baseball Classic final is not going to be U.S. and Italy.
It's so true. So true. It's funny you mentioned Tony Soprano. I'm rewatching The Sopranos for the third time. I'm finding new stuff all the time with it. I always wanted to ask you this. You were U.S. attorney during The Sopranos run. Then you run for governor. And, me and every other reporter and every other wise ass, the comparisons were too easy between you and Tony, right? From your, the North Jersey attitude, the look of you, the feel of you. Did you embrace it? Did you hate it? How did it sit with you?
I was fine with it. And by the way, it wasn't just you guys. It was all over the country as I traveled around as governor. And the great thing was that I got to be friendly when I was U.S. attorney with Jim Gandolfini. We absolutely accidentally met one day on a Broadway show. I was taking my daughter, Sarah, and he was there. And he was there to see Meadow Soprano, who was playing Beauty in Beauty and the Beast. And we were up at the refreshment stand at the intermission. And I get tapped on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Jim Gandolfini. And he says to me, hi, I'm Jimmy Gandolfini. You're the U.S. attorney, right? And I said, yeah, I'm Chris Christie. And we start chatting. And he gives me his cell phone number afterwards. And he comes in for the hug. And he whispers in my ear, the stuff that you see, it's all make-believe. It's just TV. Don't come after me. And we remained friends for years after that while he was doing the show. And then, unfortunately, when he passed away, I got invited by his wife to the funeral, which was seriously like an episode of The Sopranos, the entire funeral. So, no, I never minded the comparisons to Jim/Tony. I had a woman one time in Iowa when I was running for president asked me whether I knew Tony Soprano. And I said, well, as you probably are aware, he's an amalgam of a number of North Jersey mobsters, and a fictional character. And she looked at me, she goes, oh, so you don't know him? And I'm like, I'm trying to run for president, trying to get votes. What are you supposed to say? Come on, lady. It's a TV show. But she didn't quite get it.
Yeah. What is funny, though, is, you grew up in Livingston. I grew up in Parsippany, and I knew these people. I ran into Dre DeMatteo at Sesame Place. Okay. And I went up to her and I couldn't help myself. I said, listen, you were so good in The Sopranos. My neighbor across the street, Trisha, she was you. Like, it's the truth. Like, they were like the same person. I'm like, you nailed it. It was so perfect. And then listen to what I did, the most embarrassing thing I ever did in my life. And God bless her. I said, can you give me one Christopher? And she launches into like a monologue. Christopher, I want to see Elmo. You promised me I'd see Elmo. She goes in the whole thing. And she's very gracious, despite me being a complete asshole.
Hey, look, all of those folks, I got to know a number of them over the years. Johnny Sack, who's a Jersey guy, and obviously Steve Van Zandt and a number of the others. They're all incredibly gracious with their fans. They know how important the show is to people, and it's made careers for many of them. So, I think they're all pretty good about it.
Now, I know I only had you for a half hour today, so I'm going to let you go real quick. Here's a question. Who's tougher to negotiate with? Legislators, prosecutors, casino executives, or TV producers?
Legislators.
They're the bane of your existence.
Because the goalposts keep moving. The other ones, they usually set out a position and you get to a deal. With the legislators over the years, it was continuing to be a moving target, got a little bit harder. We got there, we got stuff done, but it was a lot more painful.
You enjoying your time on This Week? You enjoy doing that?
I do. It's amazing to me. I'm in my 9th year now.
Oh, wow.
On This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And it's been a great run. I love working with George. He's always been treating me with a lot of respect, and with John Carl and Martha as well. But it's a lot of fun, and I get to keep my sea legs underneath me, Jeff. It keeps me sharp, which I like doing because you never know. You want to get back in the fight, and you want to get back in the fight, you got to stay sharp.
All right. Well, listen, if you're going to get back in the fight, you let me know. We'll announce it here on the next time you join us on the business of betting. How about that?
Beautiful. It's great to be back with you, Jeff.
Governor, thanks so much.
Thank you.